Judge Patricia Morrison's voice silenced the courtroom. I sat motionless in the witness section, watching her hold up a manila folder stamped in red "Classified, Level 5 clearance required." The entire gallery leaned forward. My stepbrother Trevor went pale. My mother Vivian's knuckles turned white against the rail. My stepfather Robert, vice president of Northbridge Defense Systems, looked like a man watching his world collapse. But before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, before I explain how a woman who spent her career analyzing encrypted communications and tracking international threat networks ended up using those same skills against her own family, I need you to understand something. If this story resonates with you, if you have ever felt invisible in your own home, if you have ever been told you are overreacting when you know in your bones that you are right, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because what I am about to share with you is not just my story. It is a blueprint for anyone who has ever been gaslit, manipulated, or betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect them. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, I stood in the driveway of the Hayes estate in Meadowbrook Heights, where every lawn was perfectly manicured. A BMW X7, a Mercedes S-Class, and my Honda Civic lined the circular drive. My mother Vivian had clawed her way here after my father died when I was 8, remarrying within 2 years. Robert Hayes transformed our lives from comfortable to affluent, picture perfect on the surface. I had just returned from a 3-week assignment in Fort Meade, Maryland, where I had been working on decryption protocols for a cyber threat investigation involving defense contractors. My work at the NSA was not something I could discuss at dinner parties, not that I was ever really invited to dinner parties. When people asked what I did, I usually said I was a data analyst for the government, which was technically true in the same way that saying a neurosurgeon is technically someone who works in healthcare. I held level 5 security clearance, the kind of clearance that meant I knew things that could destabilize markets, end political careers, or prevent attacks before they happened. I had spent the last 4 years of my career tracking a network of cybercriminals who specialized in stealing proprietary information from defense industry companies and selling it to foreign actors. It was meticulous work, the kind that required you to see patterns where others saw noise, to follow digital breadcrumbs through layers of encryption and misdirection. What I had discovered 3 weeks ago had made my blood run cold. During a routine sweep of compromised systems, I had identified a vulnerability in the security infrastructure of Northbridge Defense Systems, Robert's company. The breach was small, almost elegant in its simplicity, the kind of thing that would be invisible to standard security protocols but glaring to someone with my training. More troubling was the pattern of access. The timestamps, the files targeted, the clumsy attempts to cover digital tracks. Everything pointed to an inside job, and everything pointed to someone who had administrative access but lacked the sophistication to hide their footprints properly. Everything pointed to Trevor. Trevor Hayes was 32 years old, 2 years older than me, and had spent those extra years perfecting the art of being a spectacular disappointment, wrapped in expensive cologne and a Harvard Business School degree that Robert essentially purchased with a new library wing donation. He held the title of Director of Business Development at Northbridge, a position that sounded impressive, but essentially meant he took clients to golf courses and closed deals that the actual sales team had already negotiated. What Robert and Vivian did not know, or perhaps chose not to know, was that Trevor had a gambling problem that had metastasized from weekend poker games to daily online betting to borrowing money from people who collected debts with baseball bats. I knew because I had eyes. I had training, and I had been watching my stepbrother spiral for the past year with the same clinical detachment I used when analyzing terrorist communications. The dinner party that night was supposed to be a celebration. Robert had just closed a major contract with the Department of Defense, something involving satellite encryption systems that would pad Northbridge's bottom line by $40 million over 3 years. Vivian had hired caterers even though she employed a full-time chef because this was the kind of evening where appearances mattered more than authenticity. I had worn a simple black dress, nothing that would draw attention, and arrived exactly on time because punctuality was one of the few things Vivian and I agreed upon. The dining room looked like something out of Architectural Digest, all crystal chandeliers and imported Italian marble, the kind of room that made you afraid to breathe too loudly. Trevor was already drunk when I arrived. Not sloppy drunk, not yet, but that particular vintage of drunk where inhibitions start to fray and cruelty begins to feel like honesty. He was holding court at one end of the table, telling some story about a client meeting that was probably 15% truth and 85% fantasy, and the assembled guests, mostly Robert's business associates and their expensively maintained wives, laughed at all the right moments. I took my seat at the far end, the seat that was technically at the table but might as well have been in another room, and tried to catch Robert's eye. I needed to talk to him about the security breach. Not here, not now, but soon. Before someone else discovered it. Before the damage became irreparable. Halfway through the main course, some obscenely expensive cut of beef that had probably cost more than my monthly car payment, I saw my opportunity. Robert was discussing the new defense contract, explaining with barely concealed pride how Northbridge had beat out 3 competitors for the deal. I waited for a pause in the conversation, then said clearly in the voice I used when briefing senior officials, "Robert, I need to speak with you about your company's security infrastructure. I have identified a significant vulnerability that requires immediate attention." The table went quiet. Vivian's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Robert looked at me with that expression he reserved for moments when I had broken some unspoken rule of social decorum, something between amusement and annoyance. "Alara, sweetheart, this is hardly the time or place for work talk. Can it wait until Monday? I am sure whatever you have found is not as urgent as you think." But Trevor, drunk and reckless, leaned back in his chair with a grin that made me think of sharks circling wounded prey. "Oh, let her speak, Dad. Little Alara probably found a typo in an email or something. You know how she is. Everything is a 5-alarm crisis when you spend your days playing with computers and pretending you are saving the world." He took another drink of wine, gesturing with the glass in a way that made drops splash onto the white tablecloth. "Tell us, sis. What earth-shattering discovery have you made this time? Did someone forget to update their password? Did you find a scary-looking line of code?" I reached into my purse slowly, deliberately, the way I had been trained to move when everyone in the room needed to pay attention. I pulled out a single sheet of paper folded once and placed it on the table in front of Robert. When I unfolded it, even from where I sat, I could see his face change as he recognized what he was looking at. It was a printout of encrypted source code, the kind that should never exist outside of a secure server, the kind that represented millions of dollars in proprietary development, and more importantly, the kind that in the wrong hands could compromise national security. Below the code was a log of access timestamps, each one corresponding to late-night sessions from Trevor's user credentials. I had highlighted them in yellow, neat little blocks of evidence that anyone with half a brain could interpret. "This is not a typo," I said quietly, my voice steady, despite the fact that every eye in the room was now on me. "This is evidence of data exfiltration from Northbridge's secure servers. Someone with administrative access has been copying classified files and transferring them to an external location. The access pattern matches your son's user credentials, Robert. This is not a game. This is a federal crime." I looked directly at Trevor, whose face had gone from smug to pale in the span of 3 seconds. "This is worth millions of dollars, Trevor. This is not a joke." The dinner party ended shortly after that. Guests made polite excuses, thanking Vivian for a lovely evening while practically running to their cars. Robert had taken the paper and disappeared into his study without a word. Vivian had ushered me into the kitchen with a grip on my elbow that would leave bruises, her voice a hiss of fury. "How dare you? How dare you come into this house and humiliate your brother in front of our guests? Do you have any idea what you have done? This is why nobody likes you, Alara. This is why you eat alone every holiday. You are so desperate to be important, so desperate to be noticed that you will destroy your own family to feel special for 5 minutes." I had heard variations of this speech before. I had heard it when I was 15 and told Vivian that Trevor had been cheating on his girlfriend. I had heard it when I was 23 and suggested that maybe Robert should look into Trevor's credit card bills because something seemed off. I had heard it every time I had tried to be truthful, every time I had refused to participate in the elaborate fiction that the Hayes family was perfect and Trevor was simply misunderstood. But this time felt different. This time I had proof that could not be dismissed as drama or exaggeration. This time I had evidence. I stayed at the house that night because driving an hour back to my apartment in Arlington seemed exhausting, and because some small, stubborn part of me wanted to see how Robert would handle this. I wanted to believe that he would do the right thing, that he would investigate, that he would hold his son accountable. I took the guest room on the second floor, the one that had been mine during the 3 years I had lived here during college before I had graduated early and fled to the NSA like a refugee escaping a war zone. The room still had my old textbooks on the shelves, still had the same blue curtains that I had picked out when I was 19, and still believed that this family could feel like home if I just tried hard enough. I could not sleep. At 1:45 in the morning, I heard voices downstairs. low, urgent, angry. I put on my robe and walked quietly down the stairs, my feet remembering which steps creaked and which ones did not. The voices were coming from the kitchen. Trevor's voice slurred and desperate. "I need the money, Dad. I need it by Friday, or they are going to hurt me. Do you understand? These are not people who give extensions. These are not people who negotiate." Robert's voice strained. "How much this time?" 80,000. A long pause. Then Robert, sounding older than I had ever heard him. "I will take care of it. But you need to get help, Trevor. This cannot continue. Your mother and I cannot keep cleaning up your messes." "What about the other thing?" Trevor's voice dropped lower. "What about what Alara said, that code she showed you?" Another pause. "Longer this time. I will handle that too. But you need to be honest with me, son. Did you take those files?" I held my breath, waiting. From my position on the stairs, I could see part of the kitchen through the doorway. Trevor was leaning against the counter, his expensive shirt wrinkled and stained, his hair standing up where he had been running his hands through it. When he finally spoke, his voice was small, defeated. "I did not know what else to do. They said they would forgive the debt if I could get them access to the satellite encryption specs. They said it was just corporate espionage, nothing that would hurt anyone. They said." Jesus Christ, Trevor. Robert's voice was flat, emotionless, the way voices get when the emotion is too big to fit into words. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Do you have any concept of the consequences? This is not some college prank. This is treason. This is the kind of thing that ends with federal prison. I should have stayed on the stairs. I should have gone back to my room and called my supervisor at the NSA and let the proper channels handle it. But I had spent 30 years watching Trevor get away with things, watching Vivian make excuses, watching Robert write checks to make problems disappear. I walked into the kitchen and said, "He is right, Trevor. What you have done is not just corporate espionage. Those files contain information related to military satellite systems. The people you sold them to are not businessmen. They are foreign intelligence operatives. You have committed a federal crime, and I am legally obligated to report it." Trevor's head snapped up. For a moment we just looked at each other, and I saw something flash across his face that I had never seen before. Not anger, not shame, something darker, something dangerous. His hand moved toward the knife block on the counter, fingers wrapping around the handle of a large chef's knife. "You are not going to say anything," he said, his voice shaking. "You are going to keep your mouth shut and mind your own business like you should have done at dinner." I took a step back, my training kicking in. Assess the threat. Identify exits. Calculate response time. Trevor put the knife down. "You are drunk and you are not thinking clearly. Let's all calm down and figure this out in the morning." But Trevor was past reason. He lunged forward, not with any skill or strategy, just pure panic and rage, the knife aimed at my shoulder. I twisted to the side, feeling the blade slice through my robe and into my skin, a line of fire that made me gasp. My phone was in my robe pocket. Even as I fell backward, even as I felt the warm spread of blood, my fingers found the emergency protocol screen. Level 5 clearance came with certain protections. One of them was a duress code, a single gesture on my phone that would send an immediate alert to the NSA's Asset Protection Division, along with my GPS coordinates, and a priority flag that meant federal agents would respond within minutes. I pressed it. One swipe. That was all it took. Trevor was standing over me, the knife in his hand, his face a mask of horror and realization. Then I heard footsteps. Vivian and Robert rushing into the kitchen. But they did not rush to me. They did not call 911 immediately. Vivian looked at the blood spreading across my robe, looked at Trevor holding the knife, and the first words out of her mouth were not, "Oh my God," or "What happened," but "Put that down and go upstairs." Now, Robert pulled out his phone, but he did not dial 911. He dialed someone else. I heard him say, "Jim, it is Robert Hayes. I need a favor. Small family emergency at the house. Need you to send someone discreet." No, just a domestic situation. An accident, really. Yes, I will owe you one." Then he called his personal attorney, not the family lawyer, but the one he used for sensitive corporate matters, and the conversation was just as coded, just as careful. Vivian knelt beside me, but she did not check my wound. She pulled me up into a sitting position, her face close to mine, and I could smell her perfume, something French and expensive that I had always associated with disappointment. "You are going to tell them you slipped," she whispered. "You got up for water, you slipped on the floor, you fell into the counter. Trevor was not even in the room. Do you understand me? This family has given you everything. We took you in. We paid for your education. We gave you a home. And this is how you repay us, by threatening to destroy your brother, by being dramatic and making everything about you. She wiped at the blood with a kitchen towel, not gently, and I could see her mind working, calculating, already constructing. The lie. Robert was wiping down the knife, wrapping it in a plastic bag. He was destroying evidence. My stepfather, a man who sat on the board of a defense contractor, a man who had security clearance himself, was actively covering up a crime. Trevor had disappeared upstairs, probably to change his clothes, to wash his hands, to become the version of himself that could deny everything with a straight face. The paramedics arrived 20 minutes later. By then, Vivian had coached me twice more on the story. I had slipped. It was an accident. I was embarrassed. I did not want to make a fuss. Robert stood in the doorway, talking quietly with the EMTs, probably explaining what a hassle it was, what an unfortunate situation, how his stepdaughter was always so clumsy. I said nothing. I just held the towel to my shoulder and let them lead me to the ambulance. At the hospital, they tried to separate me from my phone. Standard procedure, they said. I held on to it like a lifeline. The wound required 18 stitches, a neat row of black thread holding together skin that would scar. The ER doctor kept asking me questions, the kind of questions they are trained to ask when injuries do not match the story. Are you sure you fell? This looks more like a defensive wound. The angle is wrong for a slip and fall. Is there anything you want to tell me? You are safe here. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to tell her everything. But Vivian was in the room, perched on the chair by the window, her face a mask of concerned motherhood, and every time I opened my mouth, she would interrupt with some detail about my clumsiness, my tendency to overreact, my history of making mountains out of molehills. The doctor looked at me with eyes that said she knew that she had seen this before, that she understood, but without my cooperation, there was nothing she could do. They wanted me to sign paperwork, an incident report that said I had fallen, that this was accidental, that no crime had occurred. Vivian pushed the clipboard toward me. Just sign it, honey. Let's put this behind us and go home. I stared at the pen in my hand. I thought about all the times I had signed, things had gone along, had chosen peace over truth. I thought about the code I had sworn when I joined the NSA, the oath to protect and defend the promise that I would not compromise national security for personal reasons. I thought about Trevor upstairs in the house, probably passed out in his bed, probably assuming that this would all blow over like everything else. I thought about the files he had stolen, the information he had sold, the chain reaction of consequences that could follow if those satellite encryption specs ended up in the wrong hands. I put the pen down. No, I said quietly. Vivian's head snapped up. Excuse me. I said no, I am not signing that, because it is not true. I looked directly at my mother, this woman who had spent 20 years teaching me that appearances mattered more than reality, that family loyalty meant protecting the guilty and silencing the truthful. Trevor attacked me. He was trying to prevent me from reporting the federal crimes he has committed. This was not an accident. This was assault, and I am not going to lie about it. Vivian's face transformed. The mask of concern cracked, and underneath was something cold and vicious. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything we have done for you, after all the money, all the opportunities, all the chances we have given you to be part of this family, and this is how you repay us. You are going to destroy your brother's life because what? Because you want attention, because you want to feel important. Before I could respond, the door to my hospital room opened. A woman in a dark suit walked in, followed by two men in similar attire, and behind them a man I recognized from briefings at Fort Meade. Director Thompson, the head of the NSA's Asset Protection Division. The woman held up credentials. Special Attorney Camila Rios, NSA Legal Department. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to need you to step outside. Vivian stood up, sputtering. This is a private family matter. You have no right. This stopped being a private family matter the moment someone assaulted a Level 5 federal intelligence asset and then attempted to cover it up, Camila said calmly. Her voice had the kind of authority that made you understand why she had the job she had. Your presence is impeding an active investigation. You can leave voluntarily, or I can have you removed. Your choice. Vivian left. She had no choice. The two men in suits stationed themselves outside the door, and suddenly my hospital room felt like the most secure location in Virginia. Camila pulled a chair up to my bedside and sat down with the fluid grace of someone who had done this before. Director Thompson remained standing, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Analyst Vance, Camila said, and hearing my professional title felt like being thrown a rope when you are drowning. At 02:14 this morning, you activated a Level 5 duress protocol. That protocol exists for situations where a federal asset is under immediate threat. The fact that you activated it means you believed you were in danger. Is that correct? I nodded. My throat felt tight. I need verbal confirmation for the record. Yes, I activated the duress protocol because my stepbrother Trevor Hayes attacked me with a knife after I confronted him about stealing classified information from his father's defense contracting company. He struck me in the shoulder with a kitchen knife. After the attack, my mother and stepfather attempted to destroy evidence and coerce me into filing a false report claiming the injury was accidental. Camila made notes on a tablet. Director Thompson, would you like to add anything? Thompson spoke for the first time. The moment that duress protocol was activated, we initiated full surveillance. We have audio recordings from the house courtesy of the emergency protocol that activates the microphone on Analyst Vance's phone. We have her GPS coordinates. We have the 911 call made by Robert Hayes, in which he specifically asks for a discreet response and mentions calling in a favor with local law enforcement. We have already obtained Trevor Hayes' phone records, his financial records, and his user access logs from Northbridge Defense Systems. We have enough evidence to charge him with theft of classified information, attempted assault on a federal officer, and conspiracy to commit espionage. Robert and Vivian Hayes are looking at obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. I felt something break loose in my chest, something that had been wound tight for so long I had forgotten it was there. What happens now? Camila closed her tablet. Now you decide what you want. We have enough evidence to pursue federal charges regardless of your cooperation, but your testimony will make the case airtight. This is not a civil matter. This is not family court. This is federal court, and the charges are serious. Trevor Hayes is looking at a minimum of 10 years in federal prison if convicted. Your mother and stepfather will likely face charges as well, though their sentences will depend on their level of cooperation. She leaned forward slightly. But I need to know what you want, Alara. This is your life, your family, your choice. Do you want to pursue this? Do you want justice, or do you want to let it go? I thought about all the years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult. I thought about watching Trevor fail upward while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove I deserved to be in the room. I thought about Vivian's voice in my ear, telling me to lie to protect the family, to sacrifice myself one more time for the sake of appearances. I thought about the code I had sworn, the responsibility I carried, the people who depended on intelligence assets like me to make hard choices even when those choices hurt. I want justice, I said. I want the truth on record. Not compensation, not revenge, just the truth. The case took 4 months to build. During that time, I was placed on administrative leave, not as punishment but as protection. The NSA relocated me to a secure apartment, gave me a security detail that changed shifts every 8 hours, and restricted my contact with the Hayes family to communication through attorneys. I learned things during those 4 months that made my stomach turn. Trevor had not sold information to one buyer. He had sold to 3 over the course of 18 months, escalating from minor specifications to critical encryption protocols. The amount of money involved was just over $200,000, most of which had gone directly to offshore gambling sites and loan sharks. He had been on track to cause a genuine national security incident if I had not found the breach when I did. Robert and Vivian hired the best defense attorney in Washington, a man who specialized in making problems disappear for powerful people. They tried everything. They tried to claim I was mentally unstable, that I had a history of making false accusations, that I was jealous of Trevor, and had fabricated evidence. They tried to claim my security clearance made me paranoid and unreliable. They tried to have the case dismissed on procedural grounds. Nothing worked. The evidence was too solid, too comprehensive, too damning. The trial was held in federal court, not state court, which meant it was serious. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal, with flags and seals that reminded everyone that this was not just about one family's dysfunction, but about national security. I wore my work clothes, the same dark suit I wore to briefings, and I sat in the witness section with the same posture I used when presenting intelligence analysis to senior officials. Straight spine, calm expression, eyes forward. Trevor's attorney was a man named Marcus Whitmore, and he was exactly the kind of lawyer you would expect Robert Hayes to hire. Expensive suit, perfect hair, voice like warm honey mixed with arsenic. His strategy was predictable. He wanted to make this about family drama, about sibling rivalry, about a vindictive stepsister who had always resented her brother's success and had finally found a way to destroy him. He called character witnesses who testified that I had always been difficult, always been a loner, always been too intense. He called a psychologist who suggested that people in high-stress intelligence jobs sometimes developed paranoid tendencies. Then Camila Rios stood up. She did not look flustered or angry. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this moment, who had built her entire case around the knowledge that the defense would try to make this personal, and she had the tools to make it professional. She entered into evidence a document titled Diplomatic Security Service Report 77B, which outlined my professional record, my security clearances, my role in 3 major investigations that had prevented significant threats to national security. She established that I was not a junior analyst prone to overreaction, but a senior asset with a spotless record and the kind of clearance that fewer than 3,000 people in the country held. Then she played the audio recording, the one from the night of the attack captured by my phone's emergency protocol. The quality was perfect. You could hear every word. Trevor's desperate voice explaining how he had sold classified files. Robert's tired resignation. My attempt to de-escalate. The sound of the attack, my gasp, the knife hitting bone. And then crystal clear Vivian's voice. You are going to tell them you slipped. You are going to tell them you fell. Do you understand me? This family has given you everything, and this is how you repay us. The courtroom was silent when the recording finished. I watched Vivian's face across the aisle. She looked smaller somehow, like a balloon slowly deflating. Robert sat beside her with his hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead at nothing. Trevor had his head down, his shoulders shaking. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just a profound exhaustion. The prosecution called me to testify. I walked to the witness stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, and did exactly that. I explained in clinical detail what Trevor had done, what I had discovered, how I had tried to handle it properly, and what had happened in that kitchen at 2 a.m. I did not embellish. I did not editorialize. I just presented the facts the same way I would present intelligence findings in a briefing. Marcus Whitmore tried to rattle me during cross-examination, asking if I had ever loved my family, if I felt any guilt about destroying Trevor's life, if I understood the consequences of my actions. I looked at him and said, I understand that my stepbrother committed federal crimes that endangered national security. I understand that my mother and stepfather attempted to obstruct justice. I understand that my obligation to the truth outweighed any personal relationship. Yes, I understand the consequences. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Trevor was found guilty of theft of classified information, unauthorized disclosure of national defense information, and assault of a federal officer. The judge set his sentencing for 3 weeks later, but it was already clear what was coming. The minimum sentence for what he had done was 12 years. The maximum was life. Judge Morrison addressed the court before dismissing everyone. She looked directly at Vivian and Robert. This case has been deeply troubling. What started as a crime committed by Trevor Hayes out of desperation and poor judgment became a conspiracy to cover up that crime by his parents. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, you had an opportunity to do the right thing. You had an opportunity to protect your daughter and hold your son accountable. Instead, you chose to prioritize appearances over truth, loyalty over justice, and comfort over conscience. I am referring your actions to the Department of Justice for possible prosecution on charges of obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. She looked at me then. Miss Vance, this court recognizes your courage and your integrity. You did what many people in your position would not have had the strength to do. You told the truth even when it cost you everything. This court also grants your request for a permanent restraining order against all 3 defendants. They are prohibited from contacting you in any form for the duration of their natural lives. Trevor was handcuffed in the courtroom. He looked back at me once as they led him away, and I saw in his eyes what I had seen in that kitchen. Not remorse, not understanding. Just shock that there had been consequences, that being the favorite son with the expensive degree and the important job had not been enough to save him this time. Vivian stood up, her legs shaking, and tried to walk toward me. The bailiff stepped between us. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Alara, she finally said, her voice breaking. You are still my daughter. No matter what happened here, you are still my daughter. I looked at her and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just the vast emptiness of a relationship that had never really existed in the first place. No, I said quietly. I was your daughter once. But that person is gone. The person you see now is someone who chose truth over family, who chose justice over comfort, who chose herself, and I am not sorry. I walked out of the courtroom that day into a spring afternoon that felt like being born. The sun was bright. The air was clean. My shoulder still ached where the scar tissue had formed a permanent reminder of the night. Everything changed, but the pain was distant, manageable, just another sensation among many. Camila Rios walked beside me. She did not say much, but as we reached the parking lot, she turned and offered her hand. "You are going to be okay, Analyst Vance. Better than okay. You are going to be extraordinary." She was right. A year later, I was promoted to team lead of the Cyber Threat Analysis Division, overseeing a team of 12 analysts and managing some of the most sensitive investigations in the agency. I had an office with windows that overlooked the Maryland suburbs, and on clear days I could see all the way to the monuments in D.C. The scar on my shoulder had faded to a thin white line barely visible unless you knew where to look. I wore it like a badge, a reminder that survival sometimes requires scars. One morning, a year and a half after the trial, I received an email from Vivian. The subject line was, "Please read." I did not open it immediately. I let it sit in my inbox for 3 days, a tiny digital time bomb that I could defuse whenever I chose. When I finally clicked on it, the message was long, rambling, full of justifications and apologies and requests for forgiveness. She wanted to see me. She wanted to explain. She wanted me to understand that she had been trying to protect the family, that she had been scared, that she had made mistakes, but she was still my mother, and did I not owe her something for all the years she had raised me? I read it once. I considered responding. I thought about all the things I could say, all the ways I could explain why her email proved she still did not understand what she had done. Then I clicked archive. Not delete. Archive. Because sometimes the most powerful response is not anger or forgiveness, but simply moving on, simply refusing to let the past have power over the present. My team at the NSA closed 4 major cases that year. We prevented a data breach that would have compromised military communications across 3 continents. We identified and neutralized a foreign intelligence network that had been operating in the defense sector for 6 years. We did the work that mattered, the work that saved lives, even though no one outside our clearance level would ever know about it. And every time I briefed a senior official, every time I presented findings that would shape policy decisions, I thought about that dinner party where Trevor had mocked my work as playing with computers and pretending to save the world. I thought about how he had been so certain that money and power were the only currencies that mattered, how he had believed that people like me could never touch people like him. I heard through professional channels that Robert had been forced to resign from Northbridge Defense Systems. The board had given him a choice between resignation, with a modest severance package, or termination for cause, and he had taken the resignation. His reputation in the defense industry was destroyed. No one wanted to hire a vice president whose son had stolen classified information, and whose family had attempted to cover it up. The house in Meadowbrook Heights went up for sale 6 months after the trial. I saw the listing online one day when I was researching something unrelated. The asking price was $2.4 million. All that white picket fence perfection, all those carefully maintained appearances reduced to a number on a real estate website. Trevor was serving his sentence at a federal correctional institution in Pennsylvania. 12 years with possibility of parole after 8 if he demonstrated good behavior and genuine rehabilitation. I did not think about him often. When I did, it was not with hatred or satisfaction, but with something closer to pity. He had spent his entire life being told he was special, being protected from consequences, being given chances he had not earned, and in the end that protection had destroyed him more thoroughly than any punishment could have. He had never learned to be accountable because accountability had always been optional for him, until it was not. Vivian sent 3 more emails over the next year. Each one went into the archive folder, unread after the first sentence. She called my work number twice, but the calls were screened by security protocols and never reached me. She sent a letter to my apartment, but my mail was forwarded through a secure facility that filtered anything from flagged addresses. The restraining order was not just a piece of paper. It was a wall constructed from legal authority and federal resources, and it was impenetrable. She could not reach me. She could not manipulate me. She could not convince me that I owed her anything. And the silence that created was the most peaceful thing I had ever experienced. I started therapy 6 months after the trial. Not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand how I had stayed in that toxic dynamic for so long, how I had convinced myself that family loyalty required self-erasure, how I had almost let them destroy the career and the life I had built. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, specialized in complex family trauma and high-functioning professionals who compartmentalized pain in order to excel at work. She did not judge me for taking so long to leave. She did not tell me I should forgive my family or that blood was thicker than water or any of the other platitudes people offer when they are uncomfortable with the reality of family dysfunction. Instead, she asked me questions that made me think. What did you learn about your value from your mother's actions? When did you first realize that love in your family was conditional? What would it mean to build a life where you did not have to earn the right to be treated with basic respect? The answers were not easy. I learned that I had spent most of my life believing that my value came from being useful, from being smart enough or accomplished enough or quiet enough to deserve a place at the table. I realized that I had been trying to earn love from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it, people who saw relationships as transactions and affection as currency. And I began to understand that building a different life meant unlearning. 30 years of programming meant teaching myself that I deserved safety and respect and honesty, not because I had earned it through achievement, but because I was human and those things were basic rights, not rewards. I made friends. Real friends, not colleagues who nodded politely at work functions, but people who saw me outside of my job title and security clearance. I joined a book club in my neighborhood, a group of women who met twice a month to discuss literary fiction and drink wine and talk about their lives. They knew I worked for the government, but not the specifics, and they did not care. They liked me because I made them laugh, because I had interesting opinions about character development and narrative structure, because I showed up consistently and remembered details about their lives. It was such a small thing being liked for who you were instead of what you could do, but it felt revolutionary. I started dating someone I met through the book club, a woman named Isabel, who taught high school English and had the kind of laugh that made you want to tell jokes just to hear it again. She knew about my family, knew about the trial, knew that I had scars both visible and invisible, and she did not try to fix me or save me or convince me that I needed to reconcile with my mother for my own healing. She just listened when I needed to talk and gave me space when I needed silence, and built a relationship with me based on the radical concept that we were both whole people who chose each other, not out of need, but out of genuine affection. 2 years after the trial, I received a notification from the Department of Justice. Trevor's parole hearing was coming up. I had the right to submit a victim impact statement, the right to attend the hearing, the right to make my voice heard in the decision about whether he would be released early. I thought about it for a week. I drafted 3 different statements, each one more detailed than the last, each one explaining how the attack had affected me, how the betrayal had shaped my understanding of family, how the consequences of his actions rippled out far beyond that one night in the kitchen. Then I deleted all 3 drafts and sent a single sentence to the DOJ representative. I trust the parole board to make an appropriate decision based on the evidence of rehabilitation and public safety risk. I do not wish to participate in the hearing. Because the truth was, Trevor's parole did not matter to me. His presence or absence from the world did not change my life in any meaningful way. I had spent too much energy on that family already, had given them too many years of my attention and my pain and my desperate hope that things could be different. Participating in his parole hearing would have meant giving them more of my time, more of my emotional resources, more of my life, and I was done. I was so profoundly done with letting them take up space in my head. The parole was denied. I found out through an automated notification, the same kind of notification you might get about a package delivery or a calendar reminder. Trevor Hayes would serve his full sentence. I felt nothing when I read it. No relief, no vindication. Just a distant acknowledgement that justice had continued to operate with or without my direct involvement, that the system had worked the way it was supposed to work, that consequences had remained consequences. 3 years after the trial, I was offered a position at the CIA, a lateral move that would have meant more money, more prestige, and more operational involvement in international intelligence work. I considered it seriously. I met with the recruiters, toured the facility, imagined what my life would look like in that new role. But in the end, I turned it down. Not because I could not do the work, but because I realized I liked my life the way it was. I liked my team at the NSA. I liked the work we did. I liked my office with the window view and my apartment in Arlington and my book club and Isabel and the quiet, stable, peaceful existence I had built from the rubble of my family's destruction. I had spent so long chasing achievement as a form of validation, proving my worth through accomplishment, that I had forgotten to ask myself what I actually wanted. And what I wanted was not more success. It was more peace. On the 4th anniversary of the night Trevor attacked me, I took myself out to dinner. Not to celebrate exactly, but to mark the passage of time, to acknowledge how far I had traveled from that person who had sat in a hospital room and chosen truth over comfort. I went to a small Italian restaurant in Georgetown, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles and waiters who treated you like family without the dysfunction. I ordered pasta, carbonara, and a glass of wine, and I sat alone at a table by the window watching people walk past on the street, and I felt content. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabel. "How's your anniversary dinner? Want company or are you doing the solo reflection thing?" I smiled and texted back. "Solo reflection is complete. Company would be perfect." She showed up 20 minutes later, slightly breathless from rushing over, and she slid into the seat across from me and ordered tiramisu for both of us without asking if I wanted dessert because she knew I always wanted dessert. And we sat there as the sun set over Georgetown, talking about nothing important, and I realized this was what healing looked like. Not dramatic revelation, not perfect closure. Just the accumulation of small, good moments that gradually outweighed the bad ones. I never saw Vivian or Robert again. The restraining order remained in effect, and I renewed it every time it came up for review, not because I thought they would try to hurt me physically, but because I needed the legal reinforcement of the boundary I had established. They were not allowed in my life. They had forfeited that right when they chose lies over truth, when they chose Trevor's comfort over my safety, when they demonstrated that their love was conditional on my silence. And I was okay with that. I was more than okay with that. I was grateful for the clarity of it, for the clean break that the legal system had helped me create. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I regret turning in my own brother, destroying my family, choosing my career over my relationships. The question always reveals more about the person asking than it does about my actual situation. Because it assumes that family is sacred, regardless of behavior, that blood relationships deserve protection even when they become toxic, that there is something more valuable about genetic connection than about truth or safety or personal integrity. And I reject that assumption entirely. I do not regret telling the truth. I do not regret refusing to be complicit in a cover-up. I do not regret choosing justice over comfort. What I regret is that I waited so long to do it, that I spent 30 years trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it, that I allowed myself to be diminished and dismissed and gaslit because I believed that being a good daughter meant accepting whatever treatment my family decided I deserved. I regret the time I wasted. But I do not regret the choice I made once I finally understood that I had a choice at all. My life now is quiet, in the way that healthy lives are quiet. I work hard at a job that matters. I come home to an apartment that feels safe and comfortable. I spend time with people who value me for who I am rather than what I can do for them. I have hobbies that have nothing to do with professional achievement. I read books for pleasure. I take walks in the park on Sunday mornings. I cook elaborate meals on weekends just because I enjoy the process. I have built a life that is mine, shaped by my choices, protected by boundaries I enforce without guilt or apology. And it is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything I never knew I could have. In my world, justice is not about revenge or punishment. It is about truth. It is about the radical act of refusing to participate in lies, even when those lies would be easier, even when those lies would preserve relationships that feel important. Justice is about standing in front of a federal judge and saying, "This happened, this was wrong, and I will not pretend otherwise." Justice is about the permanent silence of people who spent years trying to make you small, trying to make you doubt yourself, trying to make you believe that you were the problem. And justice is about the peace that comes after when you realize that you are finally free. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where telling the truth would cost you relationships, where standing up for yourself would mean losing people you thought you could not live without? Have you ever had to choose between being right and being loved, between protecting yourself and protecting someone else's comfort? What did you choose? And if you chose silence, if you chose peace over truth, are you still at peace now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your stories because I know I am not the only one who has walked this road. And if my story helps even one person understand that they deserve better, that they have the right to demand truth and safety and respect, then everything I went through was worth it. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about finding yourself after losing everything you thought defined you. And remember that in the end, the only person who has to live with your choices is you. Choose the truth. Choose yourself. Choose the life you deserve, not the life other people think you should accept. Thank you for listening.